Hello, my name is Chris, and welcome to my channel. Today I'm going to be doing CSS Battle Daily Target for June 28, 2025. Okay, one of the first things that I always do when I do anything with CSS, and especially when I do something with CSS Battle, is try to determine like a general approach of how I'm going to do this. And usually that means, am I going to be using display flex or display grid, or I'm using position, absolute, relative, etc., or a combination of, combination of all three of those, or two of them, or whatever. When I first looked at this, I thought, man, you could really use flex or grid on this. I think both are applicable here. So what I'm going to do today is I'm actually going to solve it in two different ways. I'm going to solve it first with display flex and some position absolute. And then I'm going to solve it again all with grid. And then we can determine which approach we like better. Okay, so now we got to decide how many elements we need for flex. So we're going to give body, display flex, justify content, and align items, put everything in center, and then we're just going to use this box here in flex. Okay, so I'm going to create a div. I use letters of the alphabet to label my divs in CSS Battle to cut down on characters. Okay, so that's that. And then we're going to create another div for this rectangle and put a div inside of it for this rectangle, and we'll use display flex inside of that, right? Or display flex for this rectangle. Okay, oops. Oh, I forgot to copy my div. There we go. Paste, and then we're going to put one inside of that, and we're going to call this B. We're going to call this B, and we're going to call this C. And then we're going to create a div for this rectangle here. That's going to be D. And then finally we have this white rectangle here. And I think that's all we need. All right, so then I'm going to create a style tag. We're going to start with the body. And before we go any further on the body, let's get all these background colors. So we're going to say background, not all the background colors, but some of them are going to share. Some different elements are going to share backgrounds. So this white is also going to be our background for E. So we can lump those in together. And I'm just going to move forward with the body now, and we'll get back to colors in a minute. So body, display, flex, justify content, center, align items, center. Another thing I'm going to do right away is I'm going to give this element, this element, this element a position of absolute, so that they're out of the way when we're working on the other element. D and E are all position absolute. Cool. Now, let's go ahead and take care of a background for A and B. A and B both have backgrounds. Use background, not background color to cut down on characters. Definitely not a best practice for real life, but for this, it gives you a higher score. And then, okay, so now we're finally going to see this element, this A element. We're going to, I'm going to say it's got a width of probably 180. And a height, I'm going to say, not 180, what am I thinking? It's not even close. 380 is what I meant to say. It's too much. 360. Still too much. 340. There we go. And then the height is not 120. It's going to be 140. Perfect. Okay. And so now let's look at B. So we're going to look at B and D at the same time. We're going to get B and D are both going to have a height of 300 and a width, I'm going to guess 80. That looks a little bit, oh, we'll see in a second. And then we'll go to B, and this side of it is halfway from the right, so we have a width of 200, so we can just say right, excuse me, right 200, 2000. Oh, that's perfect, good. And then we're going to make this display flex, and then we want this div in the middle vertically, so it needs align items center, and that's all we should need there. And then we're just going to take care of D real quick, because this is just going to be left 200. Why are we not seeing D? Because we haven't given it a color yet. And it's only one with this background color, so let's go right here. Backgrounds. There we go. Perfecto. And then we need to get C. C is going to have backgrounds of this color, and it's going to have the same width as B and D, so that's going to be 80, and it's going to have the same height as A, which is 140. Perfecto. And then finally we've got div E. So I'm going to say that's probably a width of 300 and a height of 50, a little bit wide. So 280, nope, 260, getting closer, 250. There it is. Cool. All right, and as always, to get our score up, we're gonna delete the comments, and now we're gonna delete all the white space. So basically you're putting everything on one line. It's gonna look terrible, but it cuts down on characters drastically and will give you a higher score. Sometimes it doesn't make much of a difference. Alright, once I get to this point, just, whoops, I'm gonna highlight the space, hit Command D on a Mac until we get all those spaces. Delete, delete. And there we go. Alright, so this is great. Perfect. Let's submit it. Okay, we got a 100% match and the score of 606.9. All right, so let's go ahead and try this again, but this time we're going to use grid. And we'll see which approach is faster, which approach gives us a higher score, meaning, character count, and, just which approach is easier, I guess. So, what we need to do first is what I'm going to do first is I'm going to determine how many elements we need, and I'm going to put them in one by one and also give them their background color right away. This will make our lives easier in the future. All right, so I'm going to kind of work like this, right? So this is going to be our first element, which we're going to call A. Excuse me. And we're going to create our style tag. And we're going to give A background of this color here. All right. And then we're going to take this element here, that's going to be B. Go ahead and copy this. B. We're going to give that a background. This background here. Great. And then we're going to go here. Copy, we're going to call this C. And it's going to have the same background as A. You can see why I'm kind of doing this at the same time so I don't lose track. And then we're going to take this one here, that's going to be D. And this is going to be the first element with the final background color. Okay. And then we already did that, so we're here. That's going to be E. It's going to have this background, and then we have this box here and this box here, and those are going to, so we'll do this at the same time. So we've got F and G. These are both in there. And then we have H. And put that in there. And then I is going to be that rectangle. And that's going to be this background here. Don't forget the div. Okay. And then we have that one there, which is going to be J. And that's going to have this background here. And then K. This background. Oops. Finally, we have this one here, L. So L is there. Great. Okay. So there's all that. So now let's go to the body. oops, body, and we're going to say this. Well, first let's give it the background. That white color. Now we're going to say display grid. Okay, so now we're seeing all of our elements even though we haven't specified where we want to put them. Two things about this. You see this white outline here? That's the default margin that CSS Battle is putting on the body, so we want to get rid of that right off the bat. So that's gone. Now it's basically sticking all the elements into default positions, which can get a little confusing while you're trying to put everything in place. So what we're going to do is we're going to uncomment all the divs except for the very first one, and we're going to put these all in the right place one by one. And actually we're going to kind of use A to make sure our layout is correct too. So that's the next thing we need to do in the body is grid template rows. Okay, so let's look at our rows here. We've got one row here, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 rows. Thinking back to our last solution with Flex, trying to remember what these values are. I think this was 80, I want to say. Yeah, good. And I'm going to go ahead and use this A to make sure this is all correct as I type it. I believe this should be 45, the next one. So in A, we're just going to say grid row to specify which row it's in. And now we can check 2, that's correct. And now we're going to check 3. So 3 should be 50 pixels, I believe. 50 pixels, that is correct. And then we already know what the rest of it is because it's just a mirror image. The bottom is a mirror image of the top. All right, so there's our rows. All right, so now we need our columns. Grid, templates, columns. All right, our first column, I want to say it's 30 pixels. Is that right? Yes, perfect. And then the next one is going to be 45 pixels. And then let's do the same thing we did here. The rows, we're going to just go grid columns, 2, perfect. And then the next one's 45 because it's the same size. We can see that. We can eyeball that one. The next one probably looks like it's twice the size. So I think that's 90. So I want to check that one. Nope. Glad I did. 85. Too much. 80. There we go. Perfect. Okay, and the right is a mirror image of the left, so we can just do that without checking. 30 pixels. Okay, so now I think we're good. So now we just need to put everything in the correct place. And we're going to get a little bit of help with some default values here. You'll see that'll help us cut down on the characters a bit by leaning on that. So by default, A is going to be in the first row, so we don't need to mess with that. We just need columns. So we got 1, 2, 3, 4. Grid, column, 4, perfect. And now we've got to do B, which is going to put it in the next column and the next row by default. but we need to also change the row. Grid row. Now this is going to be 1 through 3, and that's correct, but then it moves it over. So we are going to have to give it grid column 5. There we go. Okay, moving right along. C. So this is going to be... Oh, one thing I forgot to do, I've already seen it with B here. Since some of these elements are going to share the same row or column or whatever, I'm going to plan for that a bit to cut down on the characters. Because there's another div that's just going to be grid column 5, like this one here, right? So we can put that in there. All right, here we are with C. This is going to have a grid row of 2. Grid row 2. And then it's going to have a grid column of 2 through 4. Grid column. Just to clarify, this here 2/4 is saying it's starting at the second column and goes up to the 4th column, so not through it. And then we're going to move on to D, and this one is pretty simple. I think all we need to do is actually we can start doubling up here, but be careful not to delete anything you don't want to delete. All right, cool. And we are going to have to specify the column, which is column 4, right? So we can throw that up here. DF, there we go. All right, let's move on to E. So E is going to have the same grid row, and its grid column is going to be 6. That's weird. I don't know what I did there. Lost track. So grid column 6. And actually, that's not what we want. We want 6 through 8. There we go. That's what I wanted to do. Okay, E and F, or sorry, F and G. Let's start with, F. That's going to be grid row 3. F. Grid row 3. And then we've got grid column, and that's for both F and G. Let's just take care of this at the same time. G, and now F is going to be just grid row 2. I'm sorry, grid column 2. Do we have any grid column 2s? We don't. So F, grid column 2, and then G is grid column 7. Oof, not B, G. There we go. Messed that up pretty good. Okay. So the rest of this should move pretty quickly. So here's H, and that's going to be grid row 2, 3, 4, grid row 4. H is grid row 4, and then it's going to be grid column 2 through 4. Perfect. And then we've got I, which is going to be grid row 4 again. So put that in there. And then it's going to be in grid column 4, right? So 1, 2, 3, 4. There we go. I see it. So here we have grid column 4. Put it in there. All right, and then we've got J, almost there, which is going to have grid column 5, J, and then grid row 4 through 6, J, grid row 4 through 6. There we go. Now we've got to do K. Okay, this one would be, again, grid row 4. And then grid column 6 through 8. Perfect. And last but not least, grab L, which is going to have grid column 1, 2, 3, 4, grid column 4. So here we are. L. And then we just need grid row 5 for L. Grid row 5. Perfect. And there we are. Perfection. Okay, so now let's get rid of all the white space and put everything on one line. First thing we're going to do is highlight all the divs with Command D on a Mac. Pull the style over. Now we're going to get rid of all the white space. And just using Command D to highlight all the like characters. And then we hit delete and delete. Now we got everything on one line. All right, so already we can see this is our last score with Flex. We have 426 characters, score of 606.9. This has a lot more characters, and frankly, I think using grid for this was a lot more work. Definitely was slightly more confusing. Took a little bit more brain power, I think. But let's go ahead and submit it and see what we get. Cool, 100% match, but our score went down by 6 points because of, 200 extra characters, 254 to be exact. Okay, so my vote is definitely for Flex on this one. Definitely can do it with grid, but it takes a little bit more work and a lot more code. All right, hope you enjoyed this video. Thanks for watching. If you'd like to see more like this, please remember to like and subscribe to my channel. Enjoy your day.